Hello and welcome to Rando Rob. Each week on Rando Rob, I'll be showing and discussing one item from my large collection of collections. New shows appear every Monday, and throughout the week, I'll be adding older episodes of Rando Rob that were previously only available to my Patreon subscribers. You can watch episodes of Rando Rob on YouTube at youtube.com/Rob O'Hara. Just look for the Rando Rob playlist. Audio versions of the show are available on my website at podcast.robohara.com or through iTunes. Just search for Rando Rob. Thanks for watching or listening, and I hope you enjoy this vintage episode of Rando Rob. It is October, the month of Halloween. Halloween is, I used to say by far my favorite holiday, and now I will just say my favorite holiday. Holidays mean, by the way, this entire, these videos are completely off the top of my head. They're not scripted at all. So I haven't really thought about this, but, as I get older, the older I get, the more sentimental I get. And I've always been nostalgic, but I find myself getting more sentimental, I will think about, I'll see a toy and I'll think about when I had that toy as a kid, and I'll think about how happy that made me. And then I'll start thinking about, how many hours my parents must have worked to buy that toy, and I'll get choked up, and then I'll go, what am I doing? I'm driving to work, or, I'm in the car. Why am I getting choked up over, some toy that I got 40 years ago? It just doesn't make any sense. But when I start thinking about certain things like that, It certainly makes me feel appreciative of the childhood I had. It makes me feel nostalgic. It makes me feel, all those great feelings. And so, because of that, it's hard not to appreciate things like Christmas and things and Thanksgiving, where that we're all about family, getting together, family celebrating, because those holidays make me think about my family. However, if you look at the whole, like everything, man, it's hard not to love Halloween. I just love Halloween. I've always loved creepy stuff. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved monsters. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved special effects since I was a little kid. And so, I was just telling my wife this. This is funny. The other day, we went to Spirit Halloween, which is those pop-up, especially, you might not know if you're not in the States, I don't know, but Spirit Halloween is a Halloween-themed store. You'll have to let me know. Let me know if I'm sure Canada has them, but I don't know if across the pond if you guys get Spirit Halloween. But they are large Halloween-oriented stores that sell masks and decorations and all the kinds of stuff that are Halloween. But they open like on the 1st of October, and then they will go through October, and they will be open like 1 or 2 days after Halloween, and then that's it. Then they close for 11 months. And then so what they do is they come in and they rent or they lease large properties that are available. So sometimes you'll see a department store. And in fact, there's one in a strip mall right by us, but it moved down one store. Last year it was here. This year it's here. But they pop up all over the place. I've probably driven by like 5 of them. And when you go in, they are, the one by my house is, oh gosh, easily 10,000 square foot. It's a large place that they've rented, and you go in and it's got costumes. It's got animatronics that are, larger than life, 6 foot tall, 8 foot tall, latex masks. But anything to do with Halloween, they have a whole row of Halloween themed coffee mugs, which my wife and I each bought coffee mugs. I got one that was the classic Universal monsters as Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, all of them all on a mug, like little mug shots all the way around. Mug shots on a mug. And I forgot which one my wife got. I think she got Pennywise from It. And then she said, I like this clown. I go, Pennywise? And she goes, who? So what are you going to do? But they have an entire area of fleece blankets. And a couple of years ago, I got a large fleece blanket, like a throw blanket that we keep on the couch that is a giant Ouija board, which I absolutely love. I told my family one year, I was like, I want you to get money early, and all my Christmas presents I want you to buy during Halloween at Spirit Halloween, and they did. And what a strange Christmas. We had family over, and people were like, "Oh, I got a new pair of socks," or "Oh, I got this thing," and I opened it up. I was like, "Oh, it's a zombie baby." It's what I've always wanted. In fact, I got a thing that looks like an electrical panel, and there's a switch on it, and there's a button, and then it has all these wires hanging off it that look like they've been severed, and when you press the button, the wires go and it makes a noise like it's electrocuted. It goes like that, and they all like it's being electrocuted. And I used double-sided tape, and I stuck it to the electrical box that's out in my workshop. I have my own breaker box out, that circuit breakers and panel fuse panel, and so I stuck it to the outside of that, and so when I walk up I can press the button and it goes I'm just a kid. I always loved that, and I still do love that. So anyway, because it is October and it's Halloween, and I know last week I shared some books, and as I was putting those books back where they go, I found two other books that were sitting there, and they were right next to each other. And by the way, I did want to mention this. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I have such a really bad habit of putting things back where they go. And so if you start to look around here, this is the Jar Jar thing that I showed several weeks ago on Rando Rob. And there are some, I think I showed these long time ago. I showed these speeder bikes, which are Lego biker scouts. I'm pretty sure I showed this actual biker scout. And so I just keep all the things from Rando Rob are just building up in piles around me, and eventually I got to go through and take all that stuff back and put it all where it goes. But anyway, so as I was putting the books that I showed last week on Rando Rob back, I saw two other books. And again, I'm such a nostalgic person, and it's difficult to describe, but like, I can look at something and all the memories with that item stay with the item. Now, I've talked about this, I've written about this, that I read sometime a long time ago. Someone said, and actually Marie Kondo had this on her show, that said if you need to declutter and get rid of things, one thing you could do is take a picture of an item, and then you can throw the item away. And then if you ever, want to look back at your pictures, you can see the pictures of the things you used to own. And I have done that. I have an entire folder, and then folders within that folder called called trash, or things I've thrown away. And when I look through that, I see nothing but regret. When I go through the pictures, I'm like, I wish I hadn't thrown that away. Oh, remember when I had that? Oh, that was cool. And I learned this through the arcade cabinets that I owned. I owned almost 100 over the years, like buying and selling. But at one time, the most I ever had at one time was a little over 30. And I wrote Invading Spaces. And when you write a book, people want to know, why are you qualified to write that book? And so I wrote a book about buying and selling arcade games, and there was a lot in that about buying and selling games from arcade auctions. And I was going to arcade auctions, and I had bought all these games, and I had tried to repair these games, and I owned these games and played these games. And so that was my credentials, is that I went, hey, I wrote this book about arcade games, and I own all these arcade games. And it really doesn't matter if you're good at repairing arcade games, or if you're good at doing the repairs, or if you paid too much when you bought them, or if you didn't get enough money when you sold them. Nobody really cares about those details. What they care about, though, is that you own all those games. So just by standing in a room with 30 arcade machines behind you, you could go, I'm the guy that bought those arcade machines. And people would say, like, man, how did you do that? And I would say, man, I used my credit card. I went to auctions and I went, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. It wasn't hard. It's very simple to buy a lot of things. It's not difficult. Look at the shelves. And so anyway, I got rid of all my arcade games. When we moved, I did not have, when I moved from the house before the house, so 2 houses ago, when I moved from that house to our last house, I did not have room in our backyard for a large arcade building. I didn't have a building back there. I didn't have the money to build something that would have been big enough to hold all those arcade games. I didn't have room in the house to do it, and that was it. I had to sell the machines. I put them in storage for a while, and I've talked about that process. It was more than selling something. It was like selling off your identity. And what I learned is that you have a certain amount of street cred as the guy who owns 30 arcade machines, because chances are, I think there's 1 or 2 people that might be watching this, but other than those people, you probably don't own 30 arcade machines. It's kind of like if 2 people are talking about how much they like Corvettes, and one guy goes, yeah, I own a Corvette. Well, kind of by default, that guy becomes the, it doesn't really mean that he knows more than the other person about Corvettes, or that he has more experience or anything. But just by owning the Corvette, that guy now has the upper hand in the conversation. And so when I would talk to people about buying and selling, or wrote a book and said, you should buy my book, and you go, I have 30 arcade machines, and they would go, okay, well, you have more than me. You must know more about the topic, which wasn't necessarily true, but that's the perception. But what I found out is that whatever weight this carries of I'm the guy that owns 30 arcade cabinets, wherever this level is the guy that used to own 30 arcade cabinets. It's almost nothing. Nobody wants to hear your input. Like if you're talking to someone about Corvettes and you go, I used to own one, and they go, well, you don't own one now. You know what I mean? And so it would be very difficult to write a book of like how to fix machines and how to do this from the guy who used to own arcade games 8 years ago and got rid of them. It just doesn't, it just doesn't have that same gravitas. Is that the way to say that? It just doesn't have the same amount of weight. And so anyway, I am once again off on a tangent. Anyway, let's get back to Rando, Rob. Let's get back to the things that I have not thrown away. And so I guess to bring that around, I would say, people have said to me like, oh, do you have a arcade cabinet? And you show them a picture and they go, oh my gosh, that's great. Do you play it? And you go, I used to own it, but I don't own it anymore. And then they're not impressed, whereas if you go, I do own it, and you go out and you take a selfie in front of the stupid cabinet and you come back in and they're like, wow, you have that right now, And so it's a different experience. And when I go through those photo albums of things that I've gotten rid of, very, very rarely do I go, well, I'm glad I got rid of that. It's not a feeling that I don't really experience that. I never, things where you think about things like books, or, there are collections I got rid of all my VHS tapes. I got rid of all my DVDs. So you could go, okay, well, I got rid of all that. But when I look at a specific toy, like I look at an action figure, I took a picture of it, and I go, I don't want that, and I throw it away, but I take a picture. Then when I look at the thing, I go, why didn't I keep that? I got all those other ones. Why wouldn't I keep one more? It's silly. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, to bring this all back around, the 2 books that I have here are books that I got in the late 1970s. When I was very young. I was born in 73. I started kindergarten in 1978, and I would say I got both of these books before 1980. So I probably owned both these books in either 1978 or 1979. So the first one, I believe, is actually the newer of the book, even though it feels like it's the older one. And we're going to look at this one first. And this book is called Monsters to Make. Now, there was nothing, I mean, when I was a kid, I watched, well, I've talked about this. The first book or the first movie I ever saw was Star Wars. And the scene that hooked me on Star Wars was the cantina scene with all the monsters and all the masks. And I just had a draw to that, to me, to a lot of people, the stars of Star Wars was Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. But to me, the stars of Star Wars were Rick Baker, the guy who did all the mess. And Rick Baker has gone on to have a huge, long career in special effects. But, Dennis Muren and Phil Tippett and all the guys that did the stop motion and did the, that made the blue screen effects for the spaceships. And those, Ben Burt, the guy that did the sound effects for Star Wars, those were the people I looked up to. And so this book, Monsters to Make, is a fantastic book that is full of monsters, and it tells you how to make them. And so I'm going to show you a couple of them. And this first one that's in here is one that I tried to make. Now, the way that this book is set up is, first of all, it shows you a general idea of what we're going to be making. And so the first one in here is Dragon. So let's take a look at that. That's what it says we're going to be making, okay? Then it tells you how to make the different parts of the dragon. Well, it tells you the materials that you'll be needing. So first of all, you're going to make the dragon's head. And the way that you make the dragon's head is you take a cardboard box, you fold up the flaps, cut the flaps so they look like an ear, and then you take a newspaper, roll it up, band it with a Band-Aid, and put that in as the nose. So that is the head of our dragon, okay? Which doesn't look much like the dragon in the original drawing. The next step of building this dragon is to get a bunch of cardboard boxes and build the general body of the dragon, and then use crumpled up newspaper to fill the spots to round off the parts of the body. And then what you're supposed to do is get a bunch, now this is from the 70s, of paper shopping bags. Like you would go to the grocery store and you would get paper bags for your groceries, and then take those and put them over that. So now you've created this body. So we've jumped to this level. This is the body of the dragon made out of boxes. We've used crumpled newspaper to fill those spots. You can see the head there at the beginning. And then what you do is you take those paper grocery bags and put them over. Then it says paint the whole thing and draw on some details. And now we're at this step. Now let me tell you, I'll wait till we get to the end here, because there's one more picture and it says once you've done all that, and it gives you some ideas on how to decorate. One thing is you can get like lids for different things and glue it to the body to make scales or dots and different ideas of how to paint it. And then the final picture is this thing right here. Now, I want you to look at that. and think about the way that we've built this, of boxes and newspaper, and then putting paper on it and painting it or whatever. I tried to build this dragon when I was a kid. We went to a grocery store, and I talked my mom into letting me get a whole bunch of boxes, and we drug these boxes. My mom had a big, giant 70s station wagon. We put all the boxes in the back of the station wagon, came home, tried to make this thing. I mean, it looked nothing like that. It looked like a pile of crap with brown paper glued to it. I drew some details on it with a Sharpie. I mean, it did not look like, and the thing is, the thing that they're selling you on at the end is that you could sit on it. Look at this kid just sitting up there. I'm going to tell you this, you couldn't have stuck anything on my dragon. It didn't look anything like that. The next one here is Man from Space. Now, again, this is the idea. It says, this is what we're going after, right? Now, there's so many interesting ideas in this book. And the first one is how to make a mask. Basically, what they do is they teach you how to make paper mache over a balloon. So you take, it gives you instructions, but you're basically making, over here, the paper mache, you put it around the balloon, then you pop the balloon once it's all dried, and you cut off the bottom, and now you've created this mask thing. And then you start attaching eyeballs to it out of ping pong balls and buttons and different things like that. I never got this to work. Like, I tried to make the paper mache. Now imagine, we've gone from paper mache around a balloon. We put some buttons on a thing, but now, there's like these leaps of faith. Like, mine didn't look anything like that by the time we got there. But there was an idea that I took from this, and I'm going to show you. Actually, it doesn't really matter here, but I want to show you just this one side. And what they've done is you take a coat hanger and then just kind of bend it, and then you make this little pincher, right? But you also have a hook on the end. And so then what you do is you put that up your sleeve, and now you have little alien pinchers, right? I ruined a lot of coat hangers in my childhood by doing that. I would take coat hangers and bend them, and they never bent quite like that. They didn't look exactly like pinchers or whatever, but I would do that and then put the hooks up in my sleeve and walk around with the little pinchers like that. And we have an abominable snowman, and I'm not going to go through every step here, but I just want to show you, like, this is the abominable snowman, and it says, hey, this is what we're going to be building. And I think that's probably the same abominable snowman that appears right here on the cover of the book. Essentially what you're going to do is get a bunch of boxes, pile them together, throw a paper or blanket over it, and then glue tissue paper one at a time until you make this thing. I never tried this one. I thought that looked stupid with all those Kleenexes on there. There is a robot, which is basically getting a bunch of boxes and building a box robot costume. There's a witch doctor, which is interesting. And basically it's just how to make like the witch doctor's staff with a big mask on the top of it. But at the very end of this, and the one that always fascinated me as a kid, is this, which is King Kong. And so if you could see the King Kong there, what the idea for this is, as you get into it, is, if you can see here, it teaches you how to make a little basic armature out of wire and some spools from spools of thread. And then once you have that basic little internal skeleton, it says, the next step, oh, look, you put clay on there and make it look like King Kong. Well, if you could do that, good on you. I never was very good at that. But then it shows you how to make little miniature houses, like out of cardboard, and it says, just follow this little template and change them up. And then the very end, it kind of shows you this idea where you can take a picture, but you want to do it with the sun, making big shadows, and then you have this cool picture of King Kong with your little miniature and stuff. I didn't specifically make the King Kong thing, but I did experiment with making little monsters and little pictures and trying to, get the shadows right and do things like that. I'm just looking here at the beginning because I want to see, I believe this is copyright 1978. So I would have been 4 or 5 years old, depending on when this came out. I probably didn't get it when it was brand new. But I had it very early on. I do remember going to a grocery store that went out of business when I was really young and going there and getting the boxes to build this dragon. In 5th or 6th grade, we did in gifted class, we did, I think it was 5th grade, we did a project where we were supposed to build something or whatever, and I built a robot, and I basically built the robot that was in this thing, and I put where its stomach was, I put a tape player, and I made a cassette tape of me going beep boop 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 beep boop beep boop, and And then I would just hit play. And then I remember that I used, you remember Hot Wheels Racetrack? I used a racetrack for the arms, and so there was just like skinny pieces of racetrack, and then used rubber band to hold gloves onto the end to look like hands. And I put Christmas lights wired in to make the eyes and some other things like that. And then you pressed play, and it would just go beep boop 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 boop. It wasn't very impressive as far as robots go, but the whole the gist, the idea, the basic core of that came from this book. Now, this other book kind of looks newer. I guess it's just because of the style of the cover, but actually, it is older. This book is from 1975. Now, I got this book either in kindergarten or first grade, and this book may look familiar to you. Someone on Facebook recently posted the exact same book, and the reason that a lot of us had this book is because it was put out by Scholastic. And Scholastic were the people that did those book fairs at all the elementary schools, and that's where I'm sure I got this. Both of these, again, I should mention, are my books. I mean, they're the real books that I had as a kid, and I've kept them all these years. But this is Movie Monsters. And so this book is in 3 parts. And the first part of the book is all about movie monsters. There's a big part here about Lon Chaney. Here's the Phantom of the Opera. Here's the Wolf Man. And so it's just like a 1-page little biography about the Wolf Man. And then there's a picture of the Wolf Man. And this was probably my introduction to Universal monsters. Here's Frankenstein's monster, This was probably the first book I ever had that actually had all those monsters in it. So the first third of the book talks about all those monsters, and it has things about about the actual costumes, like it says here, talking about Frankenstein's monster, it says the top of his head is held on by metal clamps. Rubber pieces were glued to Boris Karloff's eyelids to weigh them down and give him a sleepy, sinister look. He wore large, heavy boots to give him superhuman height. The sleeves of his padded suit were shortened to make his arms look long and dangling. So it had all these little tricks about special effects and monster makeup and stuff like that. So super cool. King Kong, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Bride of Frankenstein, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I always loved. I remember seeing the Creature from the Black Lagoon as a kid on my little black and white television in my room. And this picture is the only picture in the book. Most of them are, just shots from the movies, but this is a picture of the monster. But then you can see the guy in the suit next to him with the mask off right there, and they're putting it on. So it's like a behind the scenes photo. None of the other photos are behind the scenes pictures like that. But anyway, and then Blackula, which is always very interesting because, Blackula is definitely not a guy that you would associate with all these other ones, but it feels like an inclusion just to, for a wider audience or whatever. And I think that's great. I think there's some, horror and haunted house and Halloween and stuff is something for everybody to celebrate. And so I always, I didn't think about this as a kid, but as an adult, I appreciate the inclusivity, I suppose is the right word, for doing that. And then they included Young Frankenstein, which was always kind of silly. And I didn't realize how out of scope that was to include here until I was older. Anyway, the second part of the book is how to make a monster. And so it talks about making all your own makeup. It says making your own faces. And there are a lot of things from this that I took away. One of them right here that I remember is this little area called light and shadow. And you notice this kid is pointing the flashlight down, and you can see the look that it's making. And it shows if you put the light up or from the side, different kind of effects you could get just from lighting. There's a page on costumes. And then it gets into things like how to make warts, how to make fake blood, which I do remember trying to make fake blood and making a real mess. How to make painted scars. And then it has actual monsters, like here's how to do Dracula's makeup. Obviously, these kid versions. The one that I always liked, let me get to the Frankenstein one here, is, well, there's two. One is the melting man's hands. And I want you to look at this picture. And basically it says take these gelatin things and try to like put them on a latex glove or whatever. Man, I tried that and mine, I just made a giant mess and didn't look anything like that when I was done. Then there's Wolfman hands, but here we go. The brown bag Frankenstein. This is another one of those just huge leaps of faith. But it starts off by saying, take a brown bag. There were a lot of brown bags in the 70s. And just trace, where it goes around your face. And then you can kind of like cut it out and make a Frankenstein. I mean, look at that kid's head. It's like a Frankenstein head, right? But then by the end, it's like, well, then you can take makeup and blend it to your, your head and all this stuff. And I mean, first of all, look at that head. That's a great looking Frankenstein head. They got hair on it and everything. I mean, that's cool. But, again, my stuff just never looked that good. I probably should have known that I was not going to get a career in the special effects field based on, to be fair, when I was 6 or 7. But anyway, the third part of this book is called The Monster of Frankenstein, and it is an actual play. And so this is the third part of the book. It tells you what all monsters are going to be in the book. Or in the play. It has a script, which if you can see, I mean, there's like all the lines of dialogue and stuff like that. And then at the very end of the book, because there's some special effects in the play, like turning Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde, like live in a play, and making at the very end of the play is a guy whose head flies off, and then they show you like, oh, here's how to do these special effects. You make a oversized dummy thing with a balloon for a head, a helium balloon, which every 7-year-old had access to, just, helium balloons laying around in their room. And there's a picture of a guy disappearing, you light your face and then kind of emerge from curtains and stuff. And so, man, I tried to do a lot of these things and they never turned out in the way that they look like in here, but there's a part of this in my head that kind of did. In reality, they didn't. I mean, in reality, I look like a kid wearing a paper sack on my head with some drawn on hair. But in my head, the Frankenstein paper bag head that I made looked like the Frankenstein paper head in this book. The dragon that I made looked so stupid. It just looked like a pile of boxes. I think I threw a sheet over it or a tablecloth at one point. And people would be like, what's hiding under that tablecloth? You're like, no, that's a dragon, buddy. And so, it was not recognizable as a dragon at all, but in my head, it looked like that. So, these books really not only kindled my love of Halloween and monsters and movie special effects and all that kind of stuff as a kid, but kind of that creative side, you know what I mean? That creativity of wanting to create something, wanting to make a monster, wanting to put on a play. My friends and I would put together music videos and things like that. And then we would, like when my parents would have guests over, I would take their kids and be like, all right, we're putting on a play. We'd organize something. And then before the parents left, we're like, you got to come stick your head around the hallway and then watch our play, or whatever we would do. We had kid brains, so things didn't always make sense. Like I remember one time we had this play in the opening, I wanted to do like a fly through shot of a small town. And so I had built this little Lego town. And then at the very beginning, we just like took a flashlight and we're like through this town. And I'm sure my parents were like, what are you doing? But in my head, that was the camera and you were going through the town and it was zooming in. So, you kid brain, you think things like people are seeing things the way that you see them, and it's not necessarily true. But there's so many things in this room that I could get rid of, that when I go to thin things out, I would thin. But I'll take these to the grave with me. I don't even have to read them. All I have to do is glance at the cover, and I instantly think of, oh man, remember when we tried to do that play? Remember when I tried to build a thing with a floating head that would fly away? Or remember when I built that dragon, or when I built that robot? Like, those memories are just attached to these books. And it's not like when the books go away, the memories go away. It's just there's nothing left to trigger them. Like, that memory of building that robot is always going to be in my brain, but it doesn't come up. But then when I see this, I go, oh yeah, I remember it's got that robot in it. I tried to build that robot. Or when I see this, and I think, oh, we tried to put on that play with the levitating ghost thing, and so they're like the triggers. And, you can take pictures of the stuff and put it in the folder, and that's a great idea, but I don't go through that folder. And like I said, when I do go through the folder, I don't have the great memory of remembering the things. I just have the sadness of getting rid of the things, which is probably not the intended purpose, but that's the way it works for me. So, anyway, I got lots of shows, lots of content coming in the very near future. So check the podcast feed later this week. You'll be seeing a couple of things. You may even see some Halloween surprises towards the end of the month. And don't forget, the stream will be, as usual, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central. And we're probably going to start moving into some haunted house and Halloween kind of stuff for October. So that's always fun. Anyway, see you guys soon. And thanks for watching.